Luxury finishes. You said this looks like cardboard. My name is John. I'm 42. Been doing accounting for nearly 20 years. And I know when numbers don't add up. Same goes for drywall that bends when you touch it. Blake Morrison had taken $80,000 from me 3 months ago, promising to transform my family's home in Spokane into something we could be proud of. What I got instead was crooked electrical outlets, baseboards that didn't meet in the corners, and plumbing that made sounds like a dying animal. Blake stood in my half-finished kitchen, hands on his hips, looking like he owned the place. That's just the primer coat showing through. Once we get the final layer up, you won't even notice. I ran my finger along the edge of a cabinet door that hung at an angle. The wood felt cheap, nothing like the solid oak he'd promised. When's that happening? Soon as my crew gets back from the Henderson job. Maybe next week. Next week. He'd been saying that for a month. My wife Claire had been cooking on a hot plate in the garage while our kitchen sat gutted, and my 8-year-old daughter Megan had been asking when she could use her bathroom again. The master bathroom had been torn down to the studs 6 weeks ago. Blake kept finding new complications that required more time, more materials, more patience. I watched him pack his tools into a beaten-up toolbox. Most contractors I knew treated their equipment like their livelihood. Blake's looked like he'd bought it at a garage sale. The drill bit was bent, the level had a crack running through the bubble, and his measuring tape stuck every few inches. "You'll hear from me Monday," he said, heading for the door. "Blake." He stopped but didn't turn around. "The contract's at completion by the end of August. It's September 15th. These things take time, John. Good work can't be rushed. Good work. I've been documenting everything since week 2 when I noticed the electrical outlets weren't flush with the walls. Photos of every corner, every fixture, every surface that didn't look right. My accounting background had taught me to keep records. And something about Blake's operation felt off from the start. The way he paid his workers in cash. The way he never seemed to have permits ready when I asked to see them. The way his phone went straight to voicemail whenever I called with questions. After he left, I stood in what used to be my living room and counted 17 things that weren't right. 17 things I could see without even trying. Made me wonder what was hidden behind the walls. I'd worked hard for this house. 15 years at Tarnor Digital, running numbers for their financial department, saving every bonus and overtime check Claire and I could manage. We'd bought the place when Megan was 2, a solid 1980s ranch that needed updating, but had good bones. At least that's what Blake had told me when he knocked on my door back in June. John Morrison. He'd smiled like we were old friends. I'm Blake Morrison. No relation. But hey, great minds think alike, right? I've been doing work in the neighborhood and I couldn't help but notice your place has real potential. I should have asked for references. Should have checked with a better business bureau. Should have done a dozen things differently. But Blake had shown me photos of other homes he'd renovated. Sleek kitchens and modern bathrooms that looked like something out of a magazine. He'd quoted me a fair price for what he called luxury finishes that'll add $30,000 to your home's value. Claire had been skeptical from the beginning. Something feels rushed about him, she'd said after Blake left that first night. Why is he pushing so hard for us to sign right away? But I'd wanted to give Megan the kind of home I never had growing up. My dad had been a machinist who believed in fixing things himself, even when he didn't know how. Our house had always looked half-finished with gaps in the trim and paint that didn't quite match. I didn't want that for my daughter. The warning signs had started early. Blake's crew showed up late most days. Sometimes not at all. When I asked about permits, he'd wave me off with talk about streamlining the process and connections at City Hall. The materials that arrived never seemed to match what we'd discussed. Instead of the solid wood cabinets I'd picked out, cheap particle board showed up. When I questioned it, Blake explained it was an upgraded composite material that's actually more durable than traditional wood. 2 weeks in, I caught one of his workers urinating in my backyard instead of asking to us the bathroom. When I mentioned it to Blake, he'd shrugged. Miguel's got a shy bladder. Happens sometimes. By month 2, I'd noticed Blake's demeanor changing. The friendly contractor who'd promised to treat my home like his own had become short-tempered and evasive. He'd started avoiding my calls, showing up without notice, and leaving projects half-finished for days at a time. The electrical work looked amateur with wires sticking out of walls and switches installed crooked. The plumbing made strange noises and water pressure had dropped throughout the house. But it wasn't until I found Blake in my garage going through boxes without permission that I realized I was dealing with something more than just a bad contractor. "What are you doing in here?" Blake froze, my toolbox open in his hands, looking for a Phillips head screwdriver. "Thought you might have one I could borrow." I pointed to his truck, where a full set of tools sat visible through the open tailgate. "You've got a whole workshop right there." "Oh, right." He set down my toolbox, but not before I noticed my good drill had disappeared from its usual spot. Found what I needed anyway. That night, after Blake and his crew left, I walked through every room with a notepad and wrote down everything that bothered me. Not just the obvious problems, but the details that didn't make sense. Light switches installed upside down. Bathroom tiles that weren't level. Kitchen cabinets that didn't close properly. Baseboards with gaps wide enough to stick my finger through. I called my brother-in-law, Derek, who'd been a union electrician for 20 years. "John, you need to stop this guy right now," Derek said after I described the electrical work. "Half of what you're telling me sounds like fire hazards. When's the last time he pulled permits?" He said he'd handle all that. "Show me the permit numbers. Every legitimate job has them." I spent an hour searching through Blake's paperwork and found nothing. When I called the city building department the next morning, they had no record of any permits for my address. "Sir, any electrical or plumbing work requires permits," the clerk explained. "If someone's doing that work without permits, they're operating illegally." I hung up and sat in my truck for 20 minutes, adding up the numbers. $80,000, 3 months of my family living in construction chaos, work that might be dangerous enough to burn down my house or poison my water supply, and a contractor who'd been lying to me from day one. When Blake showed up that afternoon, I was ready. "We need to talk about permits. Already told you I've got connections. Everything's being handled. City Hall has no record of any permits for this address." Blake's expression shifted, the friendly mask slipping for just a moment. "Sometimes the paperwork takes a while to process. Bureaucrats, you know how it is. I called 3 times. They've never heard of you. Look, John, I've been doing this for 15 years. Do you want me to spend half my time shuffling papers, or do you want me finishing your house?" I looked around at the chaos that used to be my home. Exposed wires, unfinished walls, a bathroom that had been gutted for 6 weeks. "This isn't getting finished, is it?" Blake packed his tools without answering. At the door, he turned back. "I'll need the rest of the payment before we can continue. Materials costs have gone up." After he left, I made one phone call. "Building Inspection Department. This is Carla. I need to report unsafe construction work at my address." I gave her my information and explained the situation. No permits, questionable electrical work, a contractor who'd been lying about his credentials. "We can have an inspector out there Thursday morning. In the meantime, don't us any of the electrical or plumbing work that's been done." "What if the contractor comes back before then?" "Sir, if there's unpermitted work happening, you have every right to stop it. No one should be doing electrical or plumbing without proper permits and inspections." Thursday came and Blake showed up at the same time as Inspector Williams, a thin man in his 50s who carried a clipboard and wore an expression like he'd seen everything twice. "Mr. Morrison, I understand you have some concerns about the work being done here." Blake stepped forward before I could answer. "This is just a routine inspection, right? We're always happy to cooperate with the city." Inspector Williams looked at Blake's truck, then at the chaos visible through my front door. "Are you the contractor?" "Blake Morrison. Morrison Construction. Been working in this area for 15 years. License number." Blake fumbled in his wallet and produced a card. Inspector Williams examined it, then made a note on his clipboard. "This expired 8 months ago. There must be some mistake. I renewed it online. I'll check with the licensing board." Inspector Williams walked past Blake into my house. I followed, leaving Blake standing on the porch. What happened next took 2 hours. Inspector Williams examined every piece of work Blake had done, taking photos and making notes. He tested electrical outlets with a device that beeped alarmingly in several locations. He ran water in the bathroom sink and shook his head at the strange noises coming from the pipes. He measured gaps in the drywall and checked the level on surfaces that should have been flat. "Mr. Morrison, I'm going to be direct with you. This work needs to stop immediately. I'm seeing code violations in every room. Blake had been following us around, getting increasingly agitated. Those are just minor adjustments, nothing that can't be fixed. Minor? Inspector Williams pointed to an electrical outlet that was visibly sparking. This is a fire hazard in this plumbing work. He gestured to pipes that were clearly installed at the wrong angle. This could contaminate your water supply. Look, we can work something out, Blake said. Maybe schedule a re-inspection once I've had time to make adjustments. Inspector Williams handed me a thick packet of papers. These are stop work orders. No further construction can happen until these violations are addressed by a licensed contractor. Blake's face had gone pale. You can't shut down my project over a few technicalities. Mr. Morrison, Inspector Williams said, addressing me. I strongly recommend you contact your insurance company and consider having the existing work inspected by an independent contractor. Some of what I'm seeing here could pose serious safety risks to your family. After the inspector left, Blake stood in my driveway looking like a man who just watched his world collapse. John, we can work this out. I can fix whatever he's concerned about with an expired license. That's just paperwork. I've got the experience. I held up the stop work orders. Says here U.S. unlicensed workers installed electrical work that doesn't meet code and did plumbing work without proper permits. It also says continuing this work could result in criminal charges. Blake's confident demeanor finally cracked. Look, maybe I cut a few corners, but I can make it right. Just give me another chance. You've had 3 months and $80,000. That was your chance. He got in his truck and drove away. But something told me this wasn't over. Inspector Williams called me Friday morning. Mr. Morrison, we ran a background check on Blake Morrison. His contractor's license was revoked, not expired. There's a pattern here. What kind of pattern? Unlicensed work, safety violations, complaints from homeowners. We've also discovered he's been using false permit numbers on other jobs. This goes beyond simple negligence. That afternoon, I drove to the city building department and met with Inspector Williams in person. He showed me a file that was thicker than my mortgage paperwork. Blake Morrison has been flagged by the licensing board for fraudulent practices. We've identified at least 12 other properties where he's done similar work. Other families like mine worse in some cases. There's a house in Millwood where his electrical work caused a fire. Family lost everything. Another property where his plumbing work caused flooding that resulted in mold damage. Inspector Williams opened a folder and showed me photos that made my stomach turn. Electrical fires, water damage, structural problems that could have collapsed walls. Mr. Morrison, you stopped this at exactly the right time. If Blake had finished his work in your house, you might have been looking at similar damage. What happens now? We're launching a comprehensive investigation. Every property Blake has worked on in the past 2 years will be inspected. If we find violations, he'll face criminal charges for each one. I thought about the $80,000, about my family living in a construction zone, about the danger we'd been living with for months. Is there any way to recover the money I paid him? That's a civil matter, but I'd recommend contacting an attorney. With this level of documented fraud, you might have a strong case. When I got home, Claire was waiting with a concerned expression. Derek called. He wants to look at the electrical work Blake did. Derek arrived an hour later with another electrician named Pete, who'd been working commercial construction for 30 years. They spent 45 minutes examining Blake's work, using tools that beeped and flashed in ways that didn't seem good. John, this is criminal, Derek said finally. Half these outlets aren't grounded. This wire here, he pointed to something behind my kitchen wall. It's not even rated for residential use. Looks like industrial cable. Completely wrong for this application. Pete nodded grimly. I've seen work like this before. Guy's either completely incompetent or he's intentionally using substandard materials to increase his profit margin. How much to fix it? Derek and Pete exchanged glances. Honestly, you're looking at rewiring the entire house, and that's just the electrical. I can't speak to the plumbing, but if it's anything like this, he gestured around the room. You might be better off starting over. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with Claire and went through every piece of paperwork Blake had given me. Contracts that reference materials that never arrived, invoices for work that was never completed, references from other customers who, when I called them, had never heard of Blake Morrison. He planned this from the beginning, Claire said quietly. The rush timeline, the pressure to sign immediately, the cash payments to workers. I should have seen it. We both should have. But we trusted him because we wanted to believe someone could make our house beautiful. I looked around at the destruction Blake had left behind. Exposed wires, half-finished walls, a bathroom that would need to be completely rebuilt. $80,000 of damage disguised as renovation. That's when I decided Blake Morrison was going to face every consequence of what he'd done to my family and the others. Monday morning, I called Inspector Williams. I want to file formal complaints, not just for my house, but for every family Blake has hurt. Are you willing to testify? I'll do whatever it takes. Williams connected me with Detective Sarah Chen from the Fraud Division. Detective Chen explained that building code violations could be prosecuted as criminal fraud when contractors knowingly endangered families for profit. We'll need detailed documentation, photos, contracts, receipts, correspondence, everything you have. I've been documenting Blake's work since week 2. Photos of every crooked outlet, every gap in the drywall, every surface that wasn't level. Financial records showing exactly what I'd paid for versus what I'd received. Text messages where Blake had made promises he never kept. This is excellent, Detective Chen said, reviewing my files. We're building a case against Blake Morrison for fraud, criminal endangerment, and operating without proper licenses. Your documentation could be crucial for other victims. She explained that the investigation would take time. Other homeowners needed to come forward. Properties needed to be inspected. Blake's financial records would be subpoenaed to trace where the money had gone. In the meantime, do not contact Blake Morrison directly. If he approaches you, document everything, but don't engage. I didn't have to wait long. Blake showed up at my house Wednesday evening looking desperate. John, we need to talk. My attorney advised me not to speak with you directly. Attorney? Blake's confidence seemed to evaporate. Come on, we can work this out between us. Maybe I can refund some of the money. Some of it. Look, I've got other projects, other clients. I can't just stop everything to fix a few minor issues. I thought about the families in Millwood who'd lost their home to fire, the flooding damage caused by Blake's plumbing work, the mold problems that had made another house uninhabitable. These aren't minor issues, Blake. You endangered my family. That's dramatic. It's just construction. Sometimes things need adjustments. Unlicensed electrical work that could have burned down my house isn't an adjustment. Blake's expression hardened. You're making a big mistake, John. I know people in this business. You'll never get another contractor to work on this house if word gets out that you're the kind of client who calls inspectors over every little thing. Is that a threat? It's reality. This industry runs on relationships. You damage mine, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are. I watched Blake get in his truck and drive away, understanding that he still didn't grasp the scope of what was coming. He thought this was about one dissatisfied customer, one problematic project. He had no idea that Inspector Williams had identified 12 other properties, that Detective Chen was building a criminal case, that other families were coming forward with similar stories. 2 weeks later, Inspector Williams called with an update. We've completed inspections on 8 of Blake Morrison's recent projects. Every single one had major violations. We're talking about a pattern of criminal negligence that goes back at least 2 years. What happens next? District Attorney's Office is reviewing the case for prosecution. Blake Morrison will likely face multiple felony charges. That afternoon, I hired a contractor named Steve Henderson from West Hollow Aviation to assess the damage to my house. Steve had been recommended by Derek and came with proper licenses, insurance, and references I could verify. I've seen Blake Morrison's work before, Steve said grimly. You're lucky you stopped him when you did. Give me 2 weeks, and I'll have an estimate for making this right. For the first time in months, I felt like my family might actually get their home back. 6 weeks later, Blake Morrison showed up at my door at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. John, please, I need to talk to you. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Behind me, the sounds of legitimate construction work echoed through the house. Steve Henderson's crew had been making steady progress, rewiring everything Blake had touched and rebuilding the bathroom from scratch. You destroyed my entire business with one phone call. I called the building inspection department. They did the rest. Blake's hands were shaking. The city revoked my license permanently. Every project I was working on got shut down. Clients are suing me for breach of contract. How many families were you putting in danger? I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was just trying to make a living. I pulled out the folder Inspector Williams had given me containing reports from all 12 properties. Fire hazards in the Patterson house. Water damage in the Williams home. Structural problems that could have collapsed the Morrison family's garage. Sound familiar? Blake stared at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. I didn't know it was that bad. You used industrial electrical cable in residential applications. You installed plumbing without permits. You forged inspection documents. I can fix everything. Just tell the city investigators to give me another chance. You had your chance when you took my $80,000 and endangered my family with substandard work. A city inspector's vehicle pulled into my driveway. Inspector Williams got out carrying a clipboard and wearing an expression I'd learned to recognize. Blake Morrison. Blake turned his face going white. Yes, you're being served with stop work orders for the Henderson project, the Kowalski renovation, and the apartment complex on Division Street. All work must cease immediately. Blake's voice cracked. That's every active project I have. The district attorney's office will be in touch regarding criminal charges. Blake Morrison faced 18 felony charges for construction, fraud, and criminal endangerment when the district attorney's office completed their investigation. The case revealed that Blake had collected over $400,000 from families across Spokane County while performing dangerous, unlicensed work that violated dozens of building codes. His permanent license revocation was accompanied by criminal prosecution that resulted in 3 years in prison and restitution orders totaling over $600,000 to the families he had defrauded. Blake's construction business collapsed completely as word spread through the industry about his fraudulent practices, making him unemployable even as a basic laborer since no legitimate contractor would hire someone with a criminal record for endangering families. His wife filed for divorce during the trial, and his family lost their home to bankruptcy proceedings as legal fees and restitution payments consumed all their assets. 2 months after Blake's sentencing, Steve Henderson finished the renovation of my house. Claire, Megan, and I walked through rooms that actually looked like the photos Blake had shown me that first night. Solid wood cabinets, properly installed electrical outlets, plumbing that worked quietly and efficiently. "Daddy, it's beautiful," Megan said, running her hand along the smooth kitchen counter. Claire smiled as she tested the new bathroom fixtures. "This is what we were supposed to get the first time." I stood in my living room looking at walls that were straight, outlets that were level, and fixtures that had been installed by someone who understood both craftsmanship and safety. Steve's work had cost more than Blake's original estimate, but everything had been done right with proper permits and regular inspections. Sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal is simply ensuring the right people can do their job protecting others from the same fate.